Hi and welcome to Hedgehog Hollow and welcome to our weekly roundup. So in today's video is all about stamp cleaning. So first of all I'm going to take you into my stamping bathroom and I'm going to show you how to commission a stamp chamois, how to recondition a stamp chamois if it's dried out and gone all hard and crusty, how I keep my stamp chamois on a regular daily basis, and also how to clean it as well, something I probably do every couple of weeks, but you may only need to do it every few months. Now I'm also going to talk to you about how to clean a stamp once you've used Stays On. I'm also going to talk to you about cleaning your Misti and cleaning stamps in a Misti. I also want to show you what's in my stamping cleaning toolkit. So let's get started first of all with the stamp chamois. So whether you're commissioning an old stamp chamois that's gone hard like this one, or whether you're commissioning one straight out the packet, the technique is exactly the same. So I'm going to recommission this old one. So first of all, I'm going to run in the sink, and I prefer to use just slightly warm water. You can use cold water, but some tepid water is perfect. So first of all, I run in my sink, and I run it as full as I can. Then you're going to put your stamp chamois in, and you're going to leave it to soak. And what you'll find is you start to get these lighter and darker areas. Once the whole area is dark, you know that your stamp chamois is commissioned. Now a new chamois is going to take longer to condition than one that's dried out, because some of that moisture will stay in there regardless, even once it dries. So a new one, you probably want to leave it to soak for maybe 10-15 minutes, and one that's dried out will probably only need about 5 minutes. This one I only commissioned during the videos that we did during the week, so it didn't take very long to recommission it. You can see it's now nice and soft. It's going to withhold water and it's going to stay there just fine. Now if you have a stamp chamois, you do want to clean it on a semi-regular basis. First of all, to get rid of any bacteria and things that's in there, and secondly, you want to make sure you can get your ink out so that you don't just keep making your stamps dirtier. You actually want to make them clean. You can see when I pop this one in here, because I do quite a lot of stamping, my water's already quite dirty despite me only cleaning this about a week ago. I tend to clean mine probably every 2 to 3 weeks. You may only need to do yours monthly or every other month. Now again, when I clean it, I want to run a sink full of hot water. I put a cap of bleach in there. Now the bleach firstly helps me remove colour. Secondly, it removes any bacteria, and it also stops me getting any odour into my stamp chamois once it's in my coconut. So you want to run this fairly full, and then I would put this in here to soak. And I would leave it like this, probably for a good 10 to 15 minutes to try and soak out as much as I can. I'm going to let this out just because we're doing the video. Once I've let it soak, I'm going to drain it as much as I can by hand and just be careful not to splash the bleach around. I'm then going to use either some hand soap, or if you've got some Dawn, you can use that too. This just happens to be what I keep in the bathroom here. And I give it a really good lather up because I want to remove most of that bleach. And all of the ink that's still in there too. Then I'm going to run some warm water, and I'm going to keep filling it up and squeezing it out until it's nice and clean. Now the other thing I do tend to do is when I wash the cleaning rags for the house or some older towels, I will sometimes just pop my stamp chamois in the washing machine too, on one of those really hot sanitizing washes. It won't do it any harm at all. In fact, it usually comes out even cleaner than this. And but I don't put it back in the dryer to dry out because I don't want it to get that dry. I just take it out and start using it again. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to fill with water and squeezing it back out. If it's really dirty and I've done a lot of stamping, I may need to soap it up a couple of times. And there you can see it comes out a pretty good colour. I mean, this is the original. You're never going to get back to that completely. But you do tend to get most of the ink stains out, and most of what's on there is probably Stays On or permanent inks. Now I keep it in one of these coconuts, which keeps you the perfect balance of air to it. If you leave it out in the air, it'll just dry up like I showed you with this other one. I keep it in the coconut, which I've linked up in the blog post for you too. And what I do, just on a start of a stamping session, I put a couple of squirts of water in and a couple of squirts of stamp cleaner in, but you'll see me do this again later in the video. Now that I've shown you how to commission your stamp chamois, I can show you how I clean my stamps depending on the ink that I've used. So here I have my complete arsenal of cleaning products. I'm just going to move some to the side so that we can run through it. I'm going to start with my Misti and how I clean stamps on my Misti and how I clean the Misti itself. So when I've used these stamps, these are the ones that I used for a pop-up card. I just left them on here. Now the first thing I would do, if I was just using a die pad, I would take my stamp chamois and I'd give them a nice wipe over. If I was using anything other than a die pad, or maybe I was using a red that had stained my stamp slightly and I wanted to be sure all of my ink was off of there, I would take my stamp cleaner, and I use the Ranger water-based stamp cleaner. I give it a good spritz. Here we go, all over. And what I take is either one of the Ranger Rub It Scrub It's, and I'll link these up in the blog post for you, or I take an old Stampin' Up Scrub It that I have just taken one of the pads out of, and I give it a good wipe over, like this. And that will give my stamp a nice clean. Sometimes I want to buff it up again afterwards, and I would just go in with my stamp chamois and pick out any pieces like that. Now sometimes, of course, when we ink our stamps, let's take these off, we end up with StazOn actually on our Misti panel. Let me show you what I mean. So I may ink up a stamp and then I end up with a few of these corners like this. And if I took my stamp chamois to them, once by the time I've stamped, inked my stamp, stamped, maybe done it a couple of times, these are not going to fully come off. I mean, these has been a few seconds and you can already see they're quite difficult to remove. So what I do to remove this, and only do this on this side, not on the laser etch side, this is just on the plain side, I use the Adirondack alcohol blending solution, which again I'll link up for you. I put that over the affected areas, grab my stamp chamois again because I clean most of my craft room with my stamp chamois, and you'll see that that alcohol blending solution is taking it off. Sometimes you need to apply more than once, so I'm just going to do this too. And then I go back in, there we go, and they're coming off. So that alcohol blending solution will work perfectly to clean up the inside of your Misti. Now the outside of your Misti, what My Sweet Petunia recommend is this Novus. It's a readily available on Amazon, which is the most inexpensive place I've found to get it. And we use the #1 Plastic Clean and Shine. And all we do again is a light spray over and a nice polish. I again use my stamp chamois, and that makes it really nice and clean again. So that's how I clean up my Misti. So that's some of the cleaning things sorted. So I'm just going to pop this back in my stamp press drawer so it's out the way. Now StazOn. StazOn is a difficult one because it really does tend to cling to your stamps, and you'll all know that I'm not a fan of StazOn, but when it comes to cleaning StazOn, I use a Rub It Scrub It, which I have, this one is marked as StazOn only. I use the StazOn cleaner. Of course I use my stamp chamois, and I also keep at hand a toothbrush, some Q-tips, and some of these really fine Q-tips that they use in model building, so like the scale aircraft models. So let me show you how I would clean this stamp. So I'm going to ink it up with StazOn so that you can see, and you can see how clean I get my stamps after stamping. It looks pretty good considering it's had a lot of use in the last 2 weeks doing all of these tutorial videos. So I'm going to ink it up well. Now I keep Q-tips to hand all of the time because sometimes when we ink up our stamps we end up getting ink on this excess rubber piece, and all I would do at that point is take one of these Q-tips, take my water-based stamp cleaner, spritz a little bit on here, and then I just run it around the affected areas so that when I stamp out I don't get any of those lines or splodges that lots of us get on from our excess ink. Now when I want to clean this stamp, the first thing I'm going to use is the StazOn cleaner. Always use this to clean your StazOn, otherwise you will never ever get your stamps clean enough. It is quite oily though, which is why I have a Rub It Scrub It purely just for StazOn, and as I said, this one is labelled for that. Then what you want to do is you want to quite generously lather up. It has like a foam end, like a dauber on the end here. Lather up your stamp, and then I rub it over my Scrub It pad like this. So that's got rid of the majority of my ink, but you can still see there's some little residue places in there. Now, stamps like this that have lots of little nooks and crannies, these are perfect. So what I would then do is take my water-based stamp cleaner. I would then go over it with my chamois to remove anything I can. And what you can do is you can just get in those nooks and crannies and pull out any excess StazOn. This is more important when if you use StazOn photopolymers. It isn't recommended to use it on a photopolymer, but I certainly do. And this is how I clean it up to make sure that it's not going to do any damage to my stamp. You can get in those clouds, you can get in between the London Eye, you can get around the bust, you can get into the letters. And it's a cotton bud on the end, so you can see how it's picking up all that excess ink. Now, another option sometimes, if something's really dirty or I've got lots of ink in there, is I'll take a toothbrush and I'll give it a really good rubbing. So I'll take my stamp cleaner, I spray it on, and I grab my toothbrush, and you can see how that's lathering up in there. And then again, I take my stamp chamois and I polish it across here like this. And I end up with a really nice clean stamp. And if you still can see some areas, you can just pick them out with this little Q-tip. And I will link all of this up in the blog post. If you can't see the link, you need to click the downward arrow that's usually at the bottom right of this video, just underneath. And there'll be links to everything that I've shown you in this video as well. Now, I talked to you about commissioning a stamp chamois or recommissioning and also cleaning it, but what about on a day-to-day basis? So I keep it in this coconut. This coconut gives it just enough air that it doesn't go smelly or mouldy, and the fact that, as I said before, that I clean it with bleach does also help that fact as well, because a little bit stays in there, but not anywhere near enough to damage a stamp. What it also does is it doesn't let too much air in that it goes crusty like the one I showed you earlier, but just probably every stamping session, which for me is daily. For you might be every couple of days, it might be once a week. I take my large water spritzer, I put a little spritz of water in there, and I put a couple of squirts of my stamp cleaner in there. And that's just enough to keep it moist and keep it nice for cleaning all my stamps. So thanks for watching today. I hope you found this tutorial useful on how to clean your stamps, how to commission your stamp chamois, and also how to clean your stamps on a Misti and the Misti itself. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you again soon. Happy stamping!